Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
The Mythical True Crime Podcast is now proudly joining the Darkcast network of indie podcast creators. Join us as we delve into the mysterious and the macabre, exploring captivating tales of true crime, legends, and unsolved mysteries from the realms of mythology and reality. Uncover the dark, true tales of modern legends with our spoken narratives and the blend of history, crime, and the supernatural.
Hey, do you like podcasts about true crime where the host does drop swear words occasionally? Well, good news. You've arrived at the right place. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors, and welcome to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your ever-so-sparkly host, CJ. Have I told you yet I'm starting up a little side business with my daughter and her boyfriend? Yep. Come spring, we're going to be doing a farmer's market booth. I'll make t-shirts to sell, my daughter makes jewelry and she paints, and her boyfriend makes wind chimes and walking sticks. I'm pretty excited about this. And I have an Etsy store that I have to get some items put on there soon. But when I do, I'll let you know the link so you can take a peek. Find me on the socials just about everywhere as Rainbow Crimes. And please consider joining my Patreon. For less than a cup of coffee each month, you could help support this one-woman research, written, recorded, and edited show. Plus, you'll get ad-free, early release episodes, a unicorn named in your honor. Now, how can you go wrong there? And an extra episode at the end of every month as we take our unicorns out for a leisurely ride. And I tell you a true crime story not covered here on our regular episodes. I'll leave a link to my Patreon in the show notes. One question I do get asked a lot is about the first case I ever covered of Holly Harvey and Sandy Ketchum, the teenage lovers who murdered Holly's grandparents. Both girls would be in their mid-30s today. My warriors want to know if Holly and Sandra are out on parole yet. Holly is still incarcerated, but she's up for a parole board review sometime next year in 2024. And Sandra is still incarcerated as well. She's still at the same prison in Georgia, Pulaski State Prison. Incidentally, so is our victim in this episode's main case, but it still remains to be seen if Holly and Sandra are ever going to get out on parole. And that should take care of our housekeeping this episode. So let's get into our main case. The evening of October 28th in 2011, in a small rural town of Americus, Georgia, a young black trans man named Ky Peterson, he was walking home from a convenience store that was only about 50 yards from the trailer park he lived in with his mother and brothers. While he was at the store, some guy tried to hit on him, and Ky deflected the advances. A few minutes into the walk, Ky was passing an abandoned trailer, and he was immediately struck in his head from behind. This caused him to fall to the ground and black out. When 20-year-old Ky came to, he was inside the abandoned trailer that he was walking past, and the man who was hitting on him at the convenience store was naked and on top of him. The man was spewing homophobic slurs and forcing himself inside of Ky. Ky screamed in fear and pain. It was happening. Again. Yep. Once again, Ky was being attacked and raped in his own neighborhood. Dread sunk the bottom of Ky's stomach, knowing that if he told police, it'd end up just like last time. Last time, they barely even filed a report for him, let alone go out and look for and arrest his attacker. Yep. This time Ky knew he would need to fight back, because police didn't do shit last time. Adrenaline kicked in and Ky let out a savage scream. Then suddenly, he heard two familiar voices. The voices were his 14 and 16-year-old brothers who must have been out looking for him. The two young brothers flanked the rapist and they pulled him off of Ky. With each brother now at his side, Ky winced in pain as he stood up and rummaged around for something in his backpack. After Ky's first rape, he started to carry around a small pistol for protection. But as Ky was looking for his gun, the naked stranger with evil intentions came charging at Ky and his brothers. Ky pulled a cold, hard piece of metal from his pack, and he shot the rampaging naked man. One shot did it. The three boys stared at the dead man on the floor, and then at each other in disbelief. Ky tried to think about what to do next. His brothers each had petty criminal records, so telling the police was sure to get them in trouble. He didn't want to do that. After an hour of deliberating, Ky decided he was going to walk to his nearby trailer and borrow his mom's car. With the help of his brothers, they loaded the dead naked man's body into their mom's trunk, along with all the man's clothing. Ky drove out a ways to a tree-lined street. He had brought a shovel with him because he planned to bury the man, but car lights had spooked him. So he went with his plan B and just dumped the body out of the trunk of his mom's car. He figured he'd dispose of the man's clothing later somewhere else. And since the man didn't have any formal identification on him and he wasn't wearing any clothing, Ky was just hoping dumping the body would end his nightmare. He went home and he went to sleep. The following morning, Ky knew his troubles were just beginning. Ky also knew when the police looked at him, they saw someone who was assigned female at birth, although he was masculine presenting. And although they knew he was assigned female at birth, because of his masculine appearance, the police had troubles engaging their brains to believe that Ky had ever been raped. They didn't believe it the first time, and they most certainly wouldn't believe it now. Just as expected, 2 uniformed cops showed up at the trailer Ky shared with his family. This was the second time Ky had to deal with being attacked and violated by a stranger, and now the police were looking at him with contempt, bypassing the number of bruises on Ky's face. Ky and his brothers were brought to the police station for questioning. Something Ky never saw coming was that his brothers turned on him while being questioned by the police. They told police everything was Ky's idea, from luring the man to the empty trailer with the promise of sex, to robbing and killing the man, and then disposing of him. In Ky's interview, he told the police he had no intention of interacting with the stranger at the store at all. He had no intention of ever having to use his gun. He only kept it around as a precautionary. And for crying out loud, he was the victim of being sexually assaulted. A victim, not a perpetrator. And then in order to protect his brothers, Ky told a few lies as well. He said 3 Mexican men intervened and got the perpetrator off of him. Ky was just trying to spare his brothers, something they failed to do for him. The cops escorted Ky out to a little building that was a clinic of sorts. They wanted him to have a rape kit examination. The nurse conducting the procedure told Ky, "You don't seem like a rape victim to me." And I ask you, what the fuck is that supposed to mean? What does a rape victim look like, you dumbass? At that moment, Ky decided not to mention he was transgender. The following day, the results of the rape kit were in. The rape kit showed forceful penetration with both Ky's vagina and anal region. As well, Ky's DNA was found on the assailant's penis, confirming Ky's story. Still, the cops weren't buying anything Ky said. Ky was again pulled in for questioning, and this time he came clean about it being his 2 brothers that pulled his attacker off of him. And then he profusely apologized to the police for not being upfront about that in the beginning. He admitted to using his gun on the attacker. He told the police that he was scared, and that's why he tried to clean the body and move it to the remote location that it was found at. Not once did Ky ever admit to the sexual interaction between him and his attacker being consensual. He stayed consistent with his allegations of being raped, which again, the rape kit pretty much verified it. And some naysayers might claim that, no, it just verifies they had sex. But again, it was forceful penetration. So there had to be some damage to the vaginal and anal walls of Ky. None of this really mattered to the police. Ky was arrested for possession of a firearm and the murder of his attacker. In spite of Georgia's stand your ground law that has been around since 2006, that law basically states if you think somebody is about to kill you, you can kill them first. This case truly shows how difficult it is for a trans person, especially a trans person of color, to claim status of victim. Ky would sit in jail for exactly 1 year and 1 day before any movement of this case went forward. He was not officially told exactly what he was being charged with, nor was he offered any legal counsel, including a public defender who could have gotten him out of jail much quicker. Ky was not allowed to bond out, although 8 years prior, a law in Georgia had been passed stating that all persons arrested are allowed to speak with an attorney or public defender within 72 hours of being arrested. And if for some reason you don't get to see a judicial officer, you're supposed to be able to immediately bond out. None of this happened for Ky. And to have to wait over a year to talk to a public defender, that's criminal. The man Ky shot was 29-year-old Samuel Chavez, an immigrant from Honduras. Samuel worked on chicken ranches, but before he ended up in Georgia, a year or so prior to his death, he was arrested in Baltimore for second-degree assault, possession of a dangerous weapon with intent to injure, and resisting arrest. Ky's brothers were also arrested, and all 3 young men were charged with armed robbery, aggravated assault, and malice murder. At his trial, the jury found Ky guilty of involuntary manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Now, this is important because what Ky's public defender was trying to make a plea for was voluntary manslaughter. Voluntary manslaughter is a fact-based crime without malice, premeditation, or deliberation, and the act must be committed in the heat of the moment. Involuntary manslaughter is when someone dies due to someone else's negligence or reckless act. Ky's case didn't even fit involuntary manslaughter. So not only did Ky have to wait over a year to talk to a public defender, the one they gave him really sucked ass. And not in a good way. Because of this incompetent representation, Ky was stuck serving out a sentence he didn't deserve. In April of 2015, Ky was placed for some reason in protective hold, or lockdown in prison, but his family and his girlfriend were not told why. Employees of the prison also would not tell them if it was solitary confinement, and if he was being punished. Oh, I also should mention right here that Ky was placed in a women's prison. I mentioned briefly in my intro, it's the same prison Sandy Ketchum, who helped her girlfriend Holly Harvey kill her grandparents, is in. Protective hold is usually reserved for inmates who are trying to harm others or themselves. Finally, some answers came about in July 2015. Ky had tried to kill himself, but he had help in doing this. About a week before he was locked down, a female correctional officer placed a bag of Tegretol, at least 100 pink pills that are used for epilepsy and seizures, within Ky's belongings. The pills had belonged to another prisoner. The officer then signed off on her checklist that everything was in order, and then a week later Ky was moved to segregation, for no apparent reason. And mysteriously, the pills followed him. He was surprised that the pills were allowed to follow him to lockdown. But then again, the guards were neglectful and abusive towards the inmates, Ky especially. Alone with his thoughts, Ky got into the bag of pills, and he nearly ended his life. It was close, but Ky would survive the overdose ordeal that he endured. Ky and his family maintained that he never felt suicidal before. Ky had only said he really just wanted a reprieve from the hopelessness and helplessness that he'd been feeling. He only wanted a brief escape because he wasn't trying to kill himself. He had asked to speak to a counselor, but the prison wouldn't allow him to do so. nor was he ever given any therapy or counseling after he was raped. It's been reported that many trans people who are in prison have that same sense of dread and hopelessness, and solitary confinement makes it even worse. It's also pretty common for trans people to get placed in solitary, and the prison always seems to claim that it's for the prisoner's own good, to keep them safe. Frankly, I think they just don't want to deal with trans people. Expressions of gender identity, like having a bra or nail polish in the men's prison, or having facial hair or boxers in a women's prison, it can be punished with solitary confinement. Guards also sometimes profile trans people and discipline them for things that they didn't even do. In women's prisons, guards often assume that masculine trans people are responsible for any violence or rule breaking of any kind. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. Ky said by 2015, he had lived through 3 years of that kind of punishment because he's trans. The whole reason he'd been sent to solitary is because he was ill and lethargic, and the guards misconstrued his being sick and listless for insubordination. All Ky wanted to do was sit on his bed due to being dizzy and nauseated, but then a female guard pepper sprayed him for being disrespectful. When Ky yelled because he was sprayed a second time, he was tackled to the ground. All during this interaction, Ky's feet were shackled and his pants were pulled down. He said it was an extremely humiliating incident. The report that the guards filed used all female pronouns when referring to Ky, concluding with the inmate had produced a razor blade and began cutting themselves, and that Ky had become loud and disrespectful. Ky insists there was no razor blade, and he had not cut himself with the non-existent blade. By February of 2016, Ky was now 25 years old. He had spent 5 years locked up, but he was getting his first testosterone shot. Ky had been pleading since he'd been in prison for access to hormone therapy, but his voice, it fell on deaf ears. After Ky's near-death experience, his girlfriend started to do research on trans people, and she put together an informational packet that she sent to the prison personnel. This action actually helped to light a fire to get Ky his hormone injections. Along with that, Ky started to become more vocal, asking for things he needed or wanted instead of idly waiting and keeping quiet. In fact, Ky became so vocal that the feds began to look into the treatment of inmates, especially trans inmates at the Pulaski State Prison. And this was all due to another trans person, a trans woman being denied hormone therapy. The trans woman is Ashley Diamond, and she was released from prison in 2016. In 2017, she won a lawsuit against the prison for repeatedly being sexually assaulted, and also because she was being denied hormone therapy. Now, I once said, and I remember saying this, that if somebody's incarcerated, I don't think that they deserve anything special or any kind of treatment special. And that included hormone therapy. I think it was the Douglas Donna Perry case. And I kind of think I might be changing my tune a little bit on that. I think if somebody identifies as trans going into prison, then yes, they should be granted some kind of hormone therapy treatment. But I think if they're in prison and they decide, hey, I think I want to be a different gender, then I think maybe we need to seriously reconsider. And I only say that because I feel like a man who commits a crime and is placed in prison, and then he decides, hey, I want to be a woman, I think that is a decision. It is a choice. It's not necessarily something he's been living with his whole life. He doesn't necessarily have gender dysphoria. I kind of believe maybe he is doing that just because he might feel that a woman's prison is safer for him. But I also don't believe that happens very often. So I guess my true belief would be if a prisoner is going to want hormone therapy to transition, I think it needs to be looked upon as a case-by-case situation. Anyway, after Ashley's huge court win, Ky decided it was time for him to get even more proactive. He and his support system, including his girlfriend, founded a program called Freedom Overground. This organization was designed to help trans and gender nonconforming people who are inmates get what they need as far as being respected for living their truths, being able to dress for their gender identity. For example, a trans woman should be allowed to wear a bra. All people should be able to get adequate health care, including mental health care. They should not be retaliated against by prison personnel if the inmate issues a complaint. And they should have access to jobs, programs, and recreational activities. This organization helps with that, and they also help ex-cons with a reentry program. In 2020, 9 years after being arrested and charged, Ky was just about 30 years old. Ky was also being released from prison, and this is because there was a typo that was made in his case. Remember the involuntary manslaughter charge that Ky was sentenced to? Claims by the state were that this was just a typo. A clerical mistake that cost this young black trans man to spend the past 9 years incarcerated, something that Ky's public defender never bothered to even question. But when it was pointed out to the public defender 9 years later, he basically just said, "Whoops." Ky, who had dropped out of school at the age of 17 to get a job and help support his siblings, has since got his GED, and he's taking life skill courses while working on a degree. Keep on keeping on, Ky. Our True Crime Quickie this episode comes to us from Peru in November of 2013. On November 22nd, a gay man, 19-year-old Joel Sanchez Molero, went to a disco in Chachapoyas. Chachapoyas is located in the Amazon area of Peru. Not the company Amazon that we order everything from, but the real Amazon, where the rainforest is. Around 3 a.m., CCTV footage captures Joel being approached by a man named Jorge Davia. The film shows the men leaving the disco together. The next day, Joel's body was found, but it was completely unrecognizable, except for a bracelet he wore that confirmed his identity. Joel had his throat slit, his penis severed off, his fingers and toes cut off. His body parts were stuffed into a straw mattress and then lit on fire. Jorge had taken Joel to a room that was loaned to him by a friend, but because of Joel's badly burned condition, there was no DNA to find out if Joel had been raped or sexually assaulted by Jorge, or if this possibly could be a hate crime. After viewing the CCTV footage, police were able to identify Jorge as their main suspect. But police didn't have to search too hard to find Jorge. He walked into the police department, and he turned himself in. He told police he killed Joel in self-defense. To be honest, this was such an overkill, I highly doubt it was self-defense. It sounds more like a crime of premeditation first-degree murder to me. I believe Jorge knew exactly what he was going to do. Maybe not who he would do it to, but he knew someone was going to die that night, and that's why he secured a room from his friend. During Joel's funeral, hundreds of people showed up in support of finding justice for Joel. I looked for what the resolution of this case was, but nothing I could find said what Jorge was sentenced to. And I really hate when I can't find that information for you. But if the good people of Peru were up in arms over Joel's murder like it sounds like they were, hopefully Jorge received a sentence worthy of unicorn justice. Rest in power, Joel. I love you, Rainbow Warriors. You matter. Remember, it's not a crime to be gay, unless you're a murderer.